Hey all, welcome to another episode of Content Marketing Takedown. And today I'm going to be talking about personal finance site SoFi. So SoFi is a personal finance lender. They have refinancing, student loans, personal loans, home loans, and they're a pretty well-known brand. I've never used them, but have always just known their name from what they do. And I think they have a lot of commercials and things like that that kind of drive a lot of that brand awareness for them and probably good products as well. And looks like some good apps and things like that. So you've probably heard of SoFi if you're watching this, doing a lot of things right. But also on the converse side, as we'll learn, I think some of the things that make them a brand can also show weaknesses in other sides, ironically, as part of that equation. So digging right in, one of the first things I often will look at a business in a new vertical is just their metrics, and these reveal a lot without even looking at the website. So if what we actually do is look at the value of a link for them, how much weight links have for their site. This is illuminating to show several things about it. But if you haven't seen this process or heard of monthly link value or lifetime value, link value, definitely suggest checking out our article or video on how much a link is worth in your market. Basically, it's this process in practice. But the very simplified version of this is that we look at the number of linking root domains and we divide it by the traffic value per month to give it a weight of what that value is for that business on a monthly basis. And what these metrics can show is several things. One is just how much a link is worth generally in this industry, which can give you insight as to whether or not you should do manual link building or not based on those variables. But also at similar domain ratings, you can learn about the business and what might be wrong with it based on where they are currently. So if we're looking at SoFi in particular, you can see the four major players in this space are all pretty similar values in terms of domain rating and number of links. So if we assume Ahrefs is generally directionally accurate there, they should be competitive in terms of the value they have. And you can see Earnest, who we actually have done a takedown on already, and had its own problems, is at the bottom end of that. And they are the least authoritative, so that might contribute to their lack of lifetime link value. By nature, the better your rankings are, the more you're going to start realizing that value at the top. But if you have a similar amount of links, there's probably something else wrong there. So Credible, who's doing a very good job and is really the market leader right now, although Student Loan Hero is winning on some queries also, is getting more bang for their buck from their current status. And what that means is they likely have a nice combination of quality links and also a quality on page experience. Student Loan Hero, comparatively, they have way more links, higher domain rating, not by a huge amount, but it's possible the quality of those links aren't as high necessarily to only be 4 points ahead of Credible in total. And also they might have on-page problems as well. Student Loan Hero has been a historic brand that actually I held up in high regard. It was interesting to see they've actually taken a nosedive as of late. Their links have also flattened out, flat from a velocity standpoint, that all might contribute to their lifetime link value being lower. But at the surface, looking at SoFi's numbers, for such a strong brand that likely, as long as they're not doing any manipulative link building that might be contributing to some dampening there, there's probably some on-page problems that are contributing to less value for them as compared to a Credible who really has probably similar link quality and also more dialed in value. So that's the surface level analysis in looking at this. And the other thing to note is there is manual link building benefit for a business like Credible because if you can get a lifetime value, which in our description is 24 months times that monthly value to say how long on average a good link should pass value, that means that the equation is good. Whatever you're paying for a link in terms of total cost, not hopefully directly paying for a link, but the actual acquisition cost will return for them. So digging in more for SoFi in particular, you can see that their traffic is generally trending upwards. They do have that strong brand. They did get hit by that most recent update that a lot of brands did get hit by, but you can see, but their trailing growth is still solid. And I did notice a general trend. I think this speaks to Google doing a good job. Their traffic value isn't necessarily as hit as strong as their overall traffic, even though it's still a noticeable dip, but they're trending growth year over year still in a positive territory. So still good things happening for SoFi. No need to panic, but it does show there probably are some other things working here. And their brand likely is contributing to the strong link acceleration. Can't dig in in the scope of this video to detail whether or not I think those kinds of links are good or not, but it is almost certain to be the case that because of their branding activities, that they are acquiring some natural good links from that process that they can leverage. They specifically have this content section, which as a content marketing agency, I'll specifically dive into. And you can see this is a newer activity. It looks like they did do some kind of redirect recently, or at least now 16 months or so ago, and they are seeing a general upward trend with their content marketing strategy. So doing a relatively good job. They're building momentum there. It's paying dividends, at least from a traffic standpoint. And that's actually a sector that saw less hit from these recent updates, which shows there's probably also something positive going on there for them also. A general trend I did see, and not trend, but you can see it illuminated in just their structure. They do have this two-tiered folder, and it's my general recommendation to stick to one unless there's a specific reason to add a second in terms of the second adding value to the first. And in this situation, content and learn are functionally repetitive. So in our experience, shorter URLs do rank better than longer URLs. So any reason to shorten that structure will likely benefit you down the line. Might be too late for them now, but if I had done this from the beginning, I probably would have just stuck with learn. It makes sense. They're branding it learn. It just adds value and shortens the URL, still de-optimizes it slightly because of that structure and that subfolder, but otherwise is not superfluous and excessive to the point that it could be diluting slightly. I don't think it's egregious or anything, but all these things add up, and that's just something I noticed in looking at SoFi. So in looking at one of their articles, we can start digging into their content marketing strategy in particular. One thing I do like is that they subcategorize their main products. So you can shop around through the content section, which is, I think, something many people get wrong, is they won't internally link well from their content, nor make it easy for someone to browse around. Yet they still kind of push their content. If you're on that section, that's what you're thinking about. The subcategorization under the main nav is a nice way of referencing this and making both of those things interplay in a solid way. Something that immediately stands out with SoFi is a lot of their articles are outdated. They're not really updating them frequently. It has been something we've read in some of the analysis of this most recent update that it seems like Google maybe potentially is getting a little harder on sites that haven't been updating their content. And SoFi does fit into that bucket, although this section hasn't in particular been strongly hit. So potentially not in this case. But something that immediately stands out is the font size is just way too small for this business. It's hard to read. It's not enjoyable or pleasurable to read. It should be at least 18 pixels. And it's really on the small size. I would guess like 14 pixels or so. So it's hard to scan and get a enjoyable, pleasurable experience from reading this content at their current font size. I do like the pull out information they use here. It's almost like a quick answer version of what the post title is. And it might be really what a lot of people are reading, unfortunately, based on the way their current site is structured. There is some kind of sloppiness to some of their content. One of the things we try to do is as a design agency or one that's focused on design. And it's small, but it's like, let's avoid orphans with subheaders. And this small overhang, like I would rewrite this title or otherwise think about restructuring our subheaders such that orphans don't occur frequently, simply because it can look sloppy, ugly, and it kind of speaks to your feeling as a business. I don't think this stands out as much because it's a shorter title, but it's also something that explicitly stands out with post titles that I might suggest avoiding. I don't think it's brutal like every single time, or if you do it once per article, but it is a common trend. That's probably an issue that your company has. The pull quote is one of those kind of custom things that makes this install unique to SoFi. Not that these side quotes are completely unique, but it's a characteristic that is not prominent on a high percentage of sites. I would say I see this on less than 10% of sites. And that's actually a good way to think about your own content strategy is like, what are those elements that we can employ that only 10% or less do? Doesn't mean you can't use something like this as inspiration from SoFi, but understand like those all small elements do create brand and that resonant effect that makes you remember this company over time. I do like their calls to action, specifically this one. It's a nice way of pushing to learn more about SoFi, but without being too aggressive. It's just a small button at the end of the body content. It's a natural way, especially on mobile, where a lot of their readers will likely be taking in this content. It will make sense and have context for them. Another thing that I see SoFi does not employ is just adding an at SoFi Twitter when people share this content. It's a very small thing, but this is a custom piece of text that you can add that will basically make it so when everyone shares this content, two things will happen. They'll be more likely to actually follow you. And second, the people that see that content more likely to follow you as well. So this is a compounding thing that adds some following value over time and is relatively easy to customize. And we will share that link as well in the top and also in the show notes that we actually created an article on this exact process to do that. Other thing, I do like the relating linking setup. This makes a lot of sense in terms of pushing. But another kind of like overhang piece, it looks like they slowly over time decided we want to add a seventh category. This is just another thing that design wise, they maybe could rethink to just make it look a little more polished overall when thinking about this section, because it could be maybe they only want 8 or they rethink how this is done. It's 2 by 2 or something like that. It can all balance it or maybe look a little cleaner than it does now. It's not terrible, but it's just something that kind of adds up when you think about their content. Another thing in their footer specifically, it's just sloppy. There's no organization to the subheaders here that make it impossible to kind of like quickly get to the things that interest me. Because if I'm a student, I probably only want my student loan section. If I'm interested in a home loan, I only want that. And this makes it difficult for me to find that product easily. They do a much better job in their hero and really could grip that same structure to think about what their footer might look like. But it seems like a lot of thought has been put into the header, but not as much in terms of the footer. I do think a general rule, having 5 to 6 under each kind of bold subhead is a good guidance of like too much. And they clearly go into the 25 type range. That means it's excessive and could it be improved with what they do. Other things I liked about SoFi and kind of going into some of their articles is that they actually have this midway down to sometimes 3/4 way down call to action that is a little more aggressive, but I don't think it's poorly done. So they do a good job with it. And what makes it even better is this is a custom thing that they did set up with custom text. So it's clear that their writers within their CMS can actually modify this text based on the fact that I can crawl or I can select this means that they most likely can customize that text to the article they're on. Obviously, we're clearly on a bear or bull market concept here. So that's going to make for a more compelling call to action while also introducing scale into their business as compared to just if this was an image that was at the end, that would be harder to do at scale. They'd have to change it each time, but most likely they could just create a framework of several of these images that person could choose based on the article or what feels most natural, or maybe just pull one themselves that's transparent and put it in there and create a nice looking article and call to action that will make them think about that differently. They do also do something interesting in actually instructing where you're leaving the site versus staying on. Kind of on the fence about this, but I can see why they do it in terms of trying to tell the user, one, it's going to open in a new tab or stay on site, which the other ones do. And it's really a balance there. It's possible this helped them from a conversion standpoint, so it might be something to think about A/B testing for your business in the right place. Another thing that stood out about SoFi and their content strategy specifically is it doesn't seem like they're employing a quick answer strategy. So a quick answer strategy generally is think about how robots might crawl a article or topic and extract with confidence an answer to whatever that query is. So in this situation, very obviously, they're trying to optimize for what is an interest only mortgage and rank for that. And how you would most clearly solve for the confidence of a robot who would extract this from your site is to basically state that question and then immediately state the keyword is blank in this structure. And you can see in this situation, they actually go into more of a story. This is immediately discouraging Google or robots from that answer specifically. It also is somewhat bad for users as well, because reality is people want that answer quickly as compared to the longer term way of doing it. There is a nice structure and way they kind of sub answer it in these pull quotes, but the problem, unfortunately for Google, is likely the disconnect in the hierarchy and where that's present on the page as compared to the header will make it hard for them to understand that and may impact their ability to rank for this. That said, SoFi is very authoritative. It's possible they still get that quick answer based on the structure, but that's something to consider for them is that they more likely should answer it very quickly. Something I've seen increasingly is a nice answer or subtext under the hero where you can kind of add context to the article while also answering the question if applicable in that specific instance. And then it'll give you a compelling reason to go after these things and answer those questions. A lot of good things there, but digging in specifically to their content section, you see they do have a lot of content. They do have around 1,000 pages. And something that's immediately illuminating about their 1,000 results in this content section, a lot of them are clearly tied to search in some way, still relatively low performing overall. So we're on the seventh page here, not much content whatsoever. But even on page 3, that's where we get to content that has less than 100 searches per month associated with it. Some of these are quite valuable still, so that's worth considering about whether or not to kill them. But it's our recommendation that they actually think about an audit here, not necessarily removing all this content, but maybe they do need to improve it overall to get better rankings using some of these things that we qualified with what we described here. I do think a common thing with SoFi in particular that is present, and they also could leverage, is just more visuals. It is very text heavy. They do have these pull quotes, but there is room to specifically detail these things in a clearer way, like a bull versus bear market. That potentially could leverage a graph of some way. It's possible they could use CSS to create versions of this, like their quotes on the side here, that still feel high quality and scale well. But they could also put custom images in here also to kind of walk that balance and leverage design more to stand out and hopefully build the momentum from where they were previously. So we do have a good suggestion article on doing that content audit. If you haven't seen it before, John Eric De La Cruz at our company SEO manager did a great job of detailing how we do this for clients, and also have seen some nice lists for those clients where we've implemented audits. So it's potentially something that SoFi could definitely take advantage of. Another thing that's kind of common with SoFi is that their URLs are pretty optimized. I do like what they did on their learn section with the /learn, but it's my general recommendation to not have URLs be exactly the keyword. You do see instances where people get away with this by not having A plus over optimization overall. And that actually is the case with SoFi. So it is a decent way of thinking about it because they don't go aggressive with their title tag. They don't go aggressive with their headers, but it's just something I generally lean away from. And thinking about it more, I'm almost kind of like it more for them. If they know they're going to be so brand heavy that they can get more aggressive on the optimization, that's something that you can kind of think about as a business as a balance. Because I generally suggest companies try to go for A minus optimization to walk that balance of not upsetting Google and doing too much and also helping users. So that's a nice way to balance it, where if you want to get aggressive on copy on page, you can do that from a more of a sales standpoint while hopefully leaning stronger in other areas such as the linking, site-wide linking, the title tags, if applicable. In their case, they're leaning off on those two instances. And I think that is hurting them, honestly. So it's a balance, but that's just one consideration point I kind of thought through in thinking about SoFi in particular. Something I've just noticed generally is this setup does not work. Of This is the keyword is private student loans. You can tell that they're trying to get SEO in there, but still push brand forward. And that's where it's always a balance. Like SoFi is probably SoFi because they have great content strategists and brand people that are pushing against things like just having the subheader say private student loans. But it's reality that the H2 setup, and I would guess what they have for this section is an H1. It is an H1, but Google has stated that they're now smarter about thinking more intelligently about that it's more about the size than what actual header tag you put on it, which makes sense for users. You're actually saying something about your hierarchy and the importance based on the size of the copy relative, not just what the code says. So I think they're increasingly smart about understanding that difference. And in this instance, I would think that Google, if not today, wants to be smarter to actually understand this is actually what SoFi is trying to imply is their H1. And because of that, I think they are struggling for a lot of these pages where they're sort of trying to rank, but not doing quite enough because this is their common structure of putting the keyword in the H1, but actually not having it be the prominent piece of the hierarchy. such that the H2 is now the area where inference is received from an optimization standpoint, and that's hurting their ability to rank on a lot of these pages because of it. They're doing okay, but they're often like page 2, bottom of page 1, and I think it has a lot to do with that balance. But it is one of those things where your strengths are your weaknesses. SoFi is a great brand as compared to other companies, but it probably does come partially from this effort. It's a tug of war at all times. It doesn't mean you have to completely ignore it. One thing I actually do like Credible that they do is a better way of doing this is an example of trying to rank for parent student loans. They get the keyword in the H1, but they're also adding sales copy. This is that balance where the SEO fought and won a battle while still achieving brand. I'm not going to say that this is better than SoFi's equivalent version. It's probably not because of the limitations of SEO and the realities that we have to work with in these header areas, but it's at least closer. And I think that fight can be won on a lot of pages where it's equivalent to the brand experience. And in some ways, there is real argument that it's a great and better brand experience having that kind of setup. And that's the one reason why a site like Credible is winning in this space, because they're doing these kinds of things better on average. As we touched on very early, their value is stronger. They're getting more value from non-branded pages, almost certainly. Definitely, I don't even need to look. I know that they're getting more value from non-branded pages as compared to SoFi, where they're getting more brand value, but less of this equivalent value because they're doing a better job of these kind of optimizations overall. So that's really the main spiel. Overall, SoFi is a great brand, and that's going to continue to carry them in a positive way. But I think there's room internally, and I can tell by looking at their business where they're thinking about search, but maybe search isn't winning those fights in the meetings. And because of that, they're rough around the edges. They're likely going to continue to grow. I believe in SoFi, even though they got hit by the most recent update. I think brand can be the good thing about search is SoFi can quickly pivot some of these concepts and really take off as compared to, it's not as simple to quickly tweak a bad brand and really take off. So SoFi is showing positive momentum. The things they're doing from a brand standpoint are clearly paying dividends. And I would say overall, their content marketing strategy, I would give it a B minus, but have strong upside to be an A plus business if they continue to push forward as they have. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you like it, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and let me know what you thought in the comments.